Hello and welcome to Downs Your Way. I'm Colin Speller and this is episode 10 in which I interview Neil Ablard, our drummer, as part of our Back to the Start series. So here we are at Winter's End in Poole, the Sandford Holiday Park, and I'm taking the very high-risk venture of interviewing Neil Ablard, whilst in the background I have Rebecca, Steve and Nigel. Now, I can trust Nigel and Steve to behave themselves, apart from the odd rustling of a sweet packet or slurping of tea. Whether Rebecca can behave herself for the 30 minutes or so we need is the point we're about to test to the limit, I suspect.
Failed already. Yeah.
Anyway, Neil, welcome to the Downs Your Way podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh, well, you know, it's not so much by invitation, it's more by press ganging, isn't it?
Well, there is that, yeah.
Yes, there is that.
I literally couldn't escape at this point, yeah.
So this is the latest in our Back to the Start series, where we talk to members of the band about how it all began for them, where it all began, what they've got up to in their musical careers so far, really bringing you up to date to the point where they've joined Rebecca and the band. So, Neil, where did life begin for you?
Life began at a very young age, as I believe the saying goes. I was born, bred Wolverhampton, which is the same neck of the woods that Rebecca was brought into the world from. Usual childhood, played football, kicked around a bit, generally made a mess of things, got told off by parents. And when it came to the music side of things, my parents have always been really into music, so it was a kind of household that always had records playing and tape cassettes from back in the day kicking around. We didn't really have much in the way of televisual entertainment. I distinctly recall Channel 5 being a thing and coming into kind of existence.
You were lucky, 5 channels, I only had 2.
It's a fair point, well made. Television wasn't really the kind of all-encompassing entertainment media it was back then. So, my parents always had music going, and I suppose I was always kind of listening, even consciously or not, it was always there and thereabouts.
So when did you first start to, if I can use the expression without too much sniggering in the background, perform or at least play some sort of instrument or indulge in music, practical music?
My granddad, that's my mum's dad, was a kind of church musician, so he played the organ.
Okay.
And so at his house, they always had this, I think it was old plug-in, it wasn't quite a bon tempi thing, but you know, the old kind of like household organs that they used to have. And he used to play on that a little bit, and then we used to spend, me and my brother used to spend part of the 6-week holiday around their house, because my parents were working, so they used to look after us. And he was just sitting there in the corner, and I'd basically go over and just randomly plonk on things, and they could see that obviously he's got some sort of interest in it. So my granddad actually encouraged me, show me some basic chord patterns and how to read music. And this was when I was like, I must have been only about 6, 7, something like that. I wasn't very old at all. So that was really where the whole kind of getting into playing, or at least attempting to have a go at a musical instrument, came about. And from there, when I started doing it's kind of extracurricular activities at junior school levels, they'd always say, does anybody want to play a musical instrument, like a recorder or something? And I'd always stick my hand up and have a go. And it was there really that it kind of branched out into taking it a little bit more seriously. And my parents bought me, I think it was a recorder, was the first instrument that I owned. And luckily, depending on your point of view, of course, luckily I got half proficient at it. And from there, this was 8, 9 years old. There were a selection of us at school that were basically picked out and said, okay, so you guys are showing some level of aptitude for music. And so we were kind of siphoned off to one side and said, okay, we can teach you how to play a real instrument now. So,
I mean, the recorder, of course, being an object guaranteed to sort of ruin any...
It's terrifying. It's an absolutely horrific instrument. It really is. I took great delight in it at the time, but yeah, looking back, it's just a horrible noise. But I got selected to try my hand at the oboe. So that was my first actual proper instrument. I'm actually a classical oboist.
Excellent.
Off the bat. And so that's kind of where the music thing started. And from there, it obviously gradually expanded and took on the all-encompassing noise fest that it is today. I suppose you're going to ask how you ended at drums from oboe.
Well, it's made of wood, and I suppose sooner or later frustration will cause you to start hitting things with it. But so great, yes. But so yeah, that is the next obvious question. So how did you get into how and when did you get into drums?
Basically, I'd always kind of play at being in a band. This is one of the things that me and my brother and a couple of our mates used to do. So literally, the old tennis rackets turned upside down and drumming away on the banjo. At the same time, I'd turn the dining room chairs the other way around and start banging on them with knitting needles. So I just gravitated towards the drums. And that's basically how that started. It literally from kind of like playing along make-believe, playing games with your mates sort of things. I was never interested in kind of rock oboe. It didn't seem to come up too much.
So the Roxy music approach wasn't for you.
I had no idea who Brian Eno was at the time, as we said. So I basically just started playing along imaginary stuff with drums. But when I moved up to senior school, music lessons branched out, and you could do percussion as one of the options. Oh. So basically, I was like, I'd always been kind of like obsessed with looking at the drummer, watching drummers. When you saw bands playing TV and Top of the Pops and stuff like that, it was always the drummer that really caught my attention. Mainly because I think the instrument was obviously the biggest, loudest, most obnoxious. So immediately I'm like, that's what I want to do. That one there. I basically started taking lessons when I got to senior school. Just percussion. This was like tune percussion, mallet percussion, all that kind of thing. But they didn't kind of like, you can't play drum kit. No, that's not a real instrument. You've got to learn how to do xylophone and stuff like that.
Oh, right.
Which, to be honest, was a good grounding.
Yeah.
It's still percussion and obviously stick techniques and all that sort of stuff. But from there, it was only a very, very easy side step to get an actual drum kit.
A very short and slippery slope.
Absolutely, yes. So that's when that kind of kicked off, really. Got my hands on a drum kit that my parents got me, which was like an old knackered second-hand thing. Literally a battered, really, really terrible drum kit. But I think on their defence, it was one of these things where I don't want to spend hundreds of pounds on something that he might not take to.
No, well, that's fair enough.
So I got I think it must have been like a 60 quid drum kit, which it sounded like it. Yeah, it sounded like a £60 drum kit played by a guy that couldn't play. So quite how they put it with it, I've no idea. But yeah, so I got it was a toy drum kit, but it was a beginner's drum kit, and that was it really. I'd spend absolutely ages just playing, tinkering, smashing, banging, walloping.
Oh, excellent. Sorry, I should just explain in the list of noises off, which we always have to sort of apologise for. This week's noises off is a heater. We are in
We're using the word heater in the loosest sense of the word. It's lukewarmer.
It's translated at the moment. It seems to be translating electricity into noise, but there is also a very interesting flame effect on the front. We are in what is best described, I suppose, as a cabin.
It's shack, very shack-like.
Yes, and in the holiday park, and of course, I think it's designed for summer use rather than winter use. So it's a bit cold.
Yeah, insulation wasn't top of the build priority, was it?
No, I don't think so. So you're being taught on the drums. When did you start getting involved with bands, apart from the one in the living room, the make-believe one?
Yeah, the one with my mates. Pretty much straight away. Basically, this was sort of like early teenage years by this stage. So I always note that I technically think I started playing when I was about 13. But by that stage, there were other mates who were around who played guitar and had basses. Everybody was like forming bands left, right and centre. So essentially, if you owned a pair of drumsticks, it was like, Neil, yeah, you play drums, don't you? It's like, yeah, well, you're in the band now. So basically from the off, it was...
Is being a drummer a bit like being a goalkeeper at football, that you can sort of get called in to several places almost at once because nobody else wants to do it?
You say that as a joke, but it's actually true. And I found that more as I've carried on. It's like as you move further up the so-called professional ladder, the ratio of drummers to guitarists and singers is very much in my favour.
Yeah,
it has to be said. So there's for every one or two good drummers, there's at least 14 good bands that would definitely have your services if they could. And that was the case even then, really. If you actually got to the stage where you owned a drum kit as well as had a pair of sticks and could play one, it's like at that point, that's it, you were in.
Yeah, I played goal in football. I don't ever remember owning my own goal, though. So
yeah, true. That's true. I suppose the goals are provided wherever you turned up to play, though.
Yeah, jumpers for goalposts, that sort of thing. Yeah. So Tell us about your early band experiences then. When I talked to Rebecca, she talked about gigging in pubs and all the joy of that. And Steve and Nigel had similar stories. So what are your early day stories?
Yeah, all the same. It's whatever they've said. Then the same for me. It's that you'd play wherever you could. Essentially, obviously, when you're a young band, you don't have regular gigs. It's kind of like the one that's set up every 4 months. That are kind of a youth. In my case, it was a youth club or like a youth organisation that used to set up. I think there were like quarterly gigs, but the problem was there's like 47 bands each time, and everybody would be vying for a slot sort of thing. So and they shared them out quite fairly at the time, but that meant you could literally be waiting 2 years for another slot. So it was very few and far between, which meant you'd have to kind of get whatever you could whenever you could, which meant playing like afternoon pub slots at places when they were putting on their mini little festivals where it would be 10, 15 bands. And you'd show up with kind of your gear and all the other bands would have their gear, and it'd be a case of, well, almost like it is now really, you're fighting each other to get a bit of elbow space to set up on a very tiny stage with a substandard PA. So all those things that happen, but it's character building, it's...
Well, having been told off by a doyen of the Birmingham music scene for using the word genre, I shall avoid using that and say, what type of music did you play in those days?
Back then it would be... it was still a mixture depending on what band, because I did tend to... It's not so much float from band to band. I ended up being in several bands all at once, and one was definitely kind of like an indie, kind of the indie jangly guitar, pop rock kind of band. Then the other stuff was much more heavy. I was heavy rock and borderline metal when I was that kind of age. It was all heavy, fast, loud playing, and guitars that had been detuned to whatever. Guitars that had been detuned to kind of like C or something like that, and nobody knew anything about things like gauges for your strings, so they were doing them on 9-gauge strings, and the strings were just flopping off the fretboard, all that kind of stuff. So you couldn't keep your guitars in tune. You get halfway through a song and chaos within tune, because it was literally noise coming off the stage. Same with the drums really. It's like everything was based on double bass, fast double bass playing, and I didn't have a double bass, so I just had one, so it's like what single foot was going 10 to the dozen trying to keep up with these kind of like galloping guitar parts, and just it was a bit of a mess, but it's a good learning ground, it's a good proving ground.
Stairs will just cut you down.
And how did it progress for you? I mean, how did it settle down in terms of the bands you played for?
It kind of never did, really. Around that sort of time period, really. Every band only lasted for 6 months to a year, tops. And then it was the same, it was like anything, I suppose, the same scene. So it's the same group of musicians collectively, but they kind of recoagulate into different setups and stuff like that. And so you'd have this endless revolving door of essentially the same pool of musicians just forming different bands. So one period you'd be in a kind of like an indie jangly pop band, and the next it'd be hard rock, and then somebody would try something else. And, so in terms of style, they never settled down really.
So when did you first cross paths with Miss Downs?
Funnily enough, I've actually been trying to remember this, and I'm sure she'll be able to verify one way or the other. It'll be interesting to see what she thinks in terms of whether I'm accurate here, but I seem to recall I at the time was in a sort of progressive rock band, and we ended up losing a guitar player who got replaced with somebody else we knew, and I think that guitarist was a guy called Adam Dunn, and he knew Rebecca. Which I think was school. She'll shout at me if I'm wrong. Did he know him from school? Yeah, he knew him from school.
Rebecca's nodding in the background, I should say, which is a good effect on sound recording.
It doesn't quite work as well with that video, But Adam knew Rebecca, and I use the term singer loosely. We had a vocalist, should we say, with us at the time, who kind of realised his limitations and was like, I can't do this anymore. You need to get somebody that can actually sing. At which point Adam said, "Oh, I know somebody, and she's pretty good." At which point the rest of the people in the band were like, "Oh, she? Did you say is she female?" Because that was a novelty at that point. There weren't many female singers.
Still is.
Still is. Yeah. So she came down to a rehearsal in a place in the New Hampton Centre. Well, what's now the New Hampton Centre,
right?
But at the time was part of this youth organisation. It's been done up really nicely there. But when we were going there, it was literally a kind of bomb site. They had one little room in the back corner, which was kind of really damp, yucky, and they'd got a small little PA and a bass amp in there, and basically all of the bands used to be able to book a slot and rehearse there. And she got dragged down to one of those rehearsals one of the days. I think it was a Sunday afternoon, because that used to be our slot. And did Four Non-Blondes' What's Up, that song. At which point we were kind of like 3 bars in, and we were like, yeah, okay, she can sing, fair enough. You're in, we'll have it. So that's basically where I ended up crossing paths with Rebecca for the first time. And she was then in the band. There's tapes that exist of that. I've still got a tape of that particular band.
I want to hear this.
Oh, she said that. Yes, I've got that somewhere. It was that thing we recorded in Birmingham, I think.
Oh God!
This will increase the clamour that we've already got from fans to dig out some of the old material. But
yeah, it's not necessarily what you call back catalogue. It's a separate kind of little entity that we did a while back. But I found that the other month when I was clearing through some of my stuff, and I was like, ooh, hello. So yes, could well appear on the black market at some point.
So yes, we've quite a bit of stuff like that could go on the black market at some point.
You never thought I'd be so strong.
So, and one of the stories from back in those days was that, which Rebecca told me when she first mentioned you, was that he said, he's got a studio in his parents' garden that I helped build.
That
now,
is true.
The first part I could sort of embrace very easily. The second part, I confess I struggled with. The notion of Rebecca in her Bob the Builder dungarees and yellow hat on, shoveling cement or whatever. But tell us what happened. Tell us the backstory there.
Well, the backstory to that is that obviously rehearsal rooms come at a price. And I'd spent ages going to and from rehearsal rooms. And there was a new place, I've genuinely forgotten what the place was called, but there was at the time a new place in Wolverhampton that sprung up. And I can't even remember which band it was. I don't think it was the one that I was with Rebecca with. But there's another band that rehearsed at this place, and it was new, we'll rehearse there, no problem. And it was the most miserable experience I've ever had in a rehearsal room. At the time, it was always a flat rate of £10 an hour, wherever you went. These guys straight away charged £12 an hour. And obviously when you're broke, got no money and you're a teenager sort of thing, it's like, well, that's a massive hike. But nevertheless, okay, it's new, it's clean, it smells nice, fair enough. Went into the room. Obviously the rules are normally you take your breakables, so snare drum, cymbals, all that kind of stuff. Went into there, I'd got all that with me. And it's like, oh, okay, so there were literally only the shells of the drum kits, so bass drum, toms, and that was it. Okay, where are the stands? Oh, yeah, you have to hire those. It's like, pardon? Yeah, you've got to hire those. It was like £2 a stand for your session. Like, right, okay. I noticed there's not a seat as well. Yeah, you have to hire that as well. So basically, they provided you with a bass drum and a couple of toms, and that was it, and everything else you had to hire in. Obviously, they don't tell you that beforehand, so I'd gone expecting the normal setup and got stung for an increased rate on the hourly hire and having to hire all these bits as well. Needless to say, that left a really bad taste in my mouth. Oh, and to cap it off, I also got a parking ticket on that day. Because I'd parked around the corner, and in the meantime, traffic wardens had come along and actually put the bags. So it was the old parking meters where you had to put the 50p in. And I parked legit, it was fine. I'd actually put my money in and everything. But in the meantime, wardens had come along and put the bags over the top and ticketed my car. Yeah, exactly. So that I was fuming at the end of that day. So went home in a massive huff. I'm still living obviously at my parents' house at that point. And the space we've got in the back garden of my parents' house is considerable. They live on a corner, so normally you'd have a garden which would go straight behind the house. This is on an angle, so basically it at least doubles the size of the garden, if not a bit more. So I was like, well, there's room to build there. And at the time, obviously, I had no concept of exactly what this would cost. It's just that this was a good idea. And as it happens, my dad is in building. So he thought, okay, whatever. It'll get you out of the bedroom. Because at this point, I'd been practising in my bedroom sort of for an hour a night, every night for the preceding however long. So I think they were quite keen on perhaps relocating me to the bottom of the garden. So it was decided, okay, we'll build like a rehearsal shed. And we can pack it out, make it soundproofed. And obviously originally it was going to be something for just the drums, so the drums could go in there, but then it was, okay, the illusions of grandeur set in. Maybe if we made it a little bit bigger, we could get a band in. Oh, if we made it bigger than that, maybe we could get, like Dad had a little workshop that he wanted to add on to the end of it. was like, okay, maybe we can do all that. So it ended up being this massive construction, which obviously, to keep costs down, a lot of it would end up being built ourselves. At which point it was a case of roping everybody you know. So a couple of my muso mates came down, and Rebecca also definitely came in and was there several weekends, digging, chopping, clearing out all the dirt, filling wheelbarrows and all sorts. It was a group effort.
Some of which possibly even relevant to the construction project.
Quite possibly, yes. Well, we keep saying that essentially for everybody that helped, it hasn't fallen down yet, so something was done correctly somewhere along the lines. But yeah, so she did get involved, and then obviously we all benefited, because since then, I think I must have been in about 2 different rehearsal rooms since, and that was only from like other people that have said something specifically. Any of the projects I deal with, it's like, come to my place, it's free, there's parking, there's power, it's easy, so it's definitely paid itself back in the years that it's been there. It's a bit of a godsend, really. At the time it just seemed like, this seems like a good idea, we should do it, and it's only now when you look back you realise, wow, what a resource.
Yeah, it's what a good idea.
At the time I had no idea, but now it's been an absolute blessing.
Good. So let's wind forward to the current association between the two of you. So you've come on board recently on the back of Lloyd's departure. What do you make of the RD music and the RD setup? And you can. It's all right. She's
no pressure.
She doesn't listen to the
podcast. Yeah.
She doesn't listen to the podcast, so you can say.
She doesn't need to listen to it. She can hear it live at this point. It's. Without trying to sound like I'm being sycophantic, it's refreshingly...
Be sycophantic!
Be sycophantic! It's refreshingly well done. Aside from the fact that the music is obviously of a high standard anyway, which almost goes without saying when you look at the people involved and the kind of proficiency they all have. The songwriting is brilliant, the performances are great, the musicianship is top notch. But more than that, for me, it's the organisation aspect. When I very first went around Steve's house to have just a brief meeting and a chat, it was almost this kind of like apology that we've got this kind of like spreadsheet with notes, and I'm really sorry, but it's like, no, this is perfect. It's the kind of thing I really love, is detail that's worked out, and you know where you've got to be, when you've got to be, what the plan is, short-term goals, long-term goals. It's done properly,
That's what happens if you take some boring old fart who used to run a business and get him to transfer some of his skills to this particular industry, where it's not very common. It's not a common practice, I grant you. But from my point of view, I think when you're doing something like this, which is essentially very entrepreneurial, when you get people coming on board, and after all, they're not doing it for the glittering prizes or the massive riches. You've got to kind of set out to them, I think, what it's about, and how it works, because there's a lot of assumptions in the game, and a lot of potential for misunderstanding, shall we say, between people. Now, the other thing is, and I'm looking ahead here a little bit, because not long after this goes out, hopefully, if we can get the ducks in a row, another piece of content will be hitting the airwaves and the streets, as it were, in which you've had a very significant hand as a videographer, a filmmaker. What I personally believe to be quite a superb music video.
You're in great taste, that's
So how did you get into that game, as it were? Because I should also, sorry to cut across you, but I should also add, for the benefit of our listener, Neil comes with a battery of camera equipment along with his drums and his sticks. Goodness knows how many GoPros, a top quality 35mm SLR, or whatever you call them these days, digital SLR, and the background, the software, and the eye for the creation using that particular medium. So how did you get into that?
And that was almost kind of forced to do it, because it came out of it from the music side of stuff, where playing in bands, it's you need content. With the explosion of internet-based stuff, you need content, you need video, you need web presence, you need stuff that's going to engage when you as a band can't be there. And essentially nobody else in any of the bands that I've ever been in has showed any sort of interest, or not necessarily gumption, that's not the right way of putting it, but basically I want to play the guitar, I'll play the bass, and that's what I do. And I've always been, well, somebody needs to do this because it needs to be done, so I've sort of put myself in that position. I've always had a bit of an interest in photography. I wouldn't ever say I was kind of anything less than mildly proficient. But it's not too far a jump from photography to videography, really. I am literally just an amateur, kind of a keen enthusiast from that point of view. I wouldn't say I've got any level of proficiency in the way that I'd say, I could play drums. Sort of thing. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a video filmmaker.
Well, we're probably about to test that.
Well, yes, that
particular piece of modesty. I mean, I'm bound to say it's hugely valuable to us because you can spend a lot of time and money doing these things, and it's a moot point sometimes whether that investment is worthwhile. If you can deliver good content off your own back, that's absolutely ideal. Just, I'm sort of looking at the time really, just one final point, because, I mean, you don't do this full time. You also, have and run a business. Just say a little bit about that.
What, running the business?
Yeah, what is your business? What
business, it's called Solo Signs. We make, manufacture and install signage of all types for buildings, businesses, individuals, vehicle graphics, advertising, wraps for vehicles, all that kind of thing. This is a plug. It's turned into a plug.
Well, that's fair enough.
No, yeah, absolutely. And that funnily enough, that came about also through circumstance rather than any kind of career decision, thinking, I know what I want to be. I want to get into the sign industry. My brother started doing it when he came out of university. He was kicking around looking for a job because he came out of university with an immunology degree.
All right, yeah.
So as you do, it's like, I'll go and work in the sign industry then, because basically that's all he could get at the time.
Yeah, but his day may have arrived.
Well, as it happens, yes. If only he kept up to speed exactly for kind of outbreaks. But nevertheless, he got a job working with one of his friends, because he plays hockey, it's his sport of choice, and one of his hockey friends had got this business doing signage, and he started doing that, and then over the course of a couple of years his mate dropped out, and Darryl basically inherited the business. And because I was busy in bands at the time, I'd kind of never had a proper career or anything which I could actually see. I'd worked briefly in like a number of jobs. I worked for the health service. I'd worked bits and bobs in car garages and stuff like that. But I never wanted to commit to anything because I always wanted to be free to play in bands. But I really needed a job at that point. I was kind of between gigs, and so my brother said, "Well, we're thinking of moving what we do and rebranding his business and basically starting it afresh, because this was after the last financial crash. Sales had dipped, so it was kind of like reorganise it and start it. Should we do that?" And so I basically ended up becoming a kind of co-director with him in that instance, and from there, that's where the kind of finance for this comes from, and then I can manipulate the free time to do the arty creative stuff.
Well, excellent, and we're very grateful for that. And if you want an obvious example of Neil's handiwork in his daytime job, as it were, just take a look at the cover on his bass drum.
That's true, yes, I did the bass drum head, yeah.
Yes,
it definitely has perks.
Yes, yes. So, well, that's been really great. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
No, thanks for having
me. We will get that out, and thank you to those in the background for
contributions from behind you.
They've been they're rather somnolent. They've done their set, and they've eaten what is known up north as a big tea, and are now sleeping both of those off on respective sofas. Neil, thank you very much indeed, and look forward to speaking to you again on this sometime in the future.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Downs Your Way. As usual, we have a merchandise discount code, and this episode's code is Neil, all in capitals, NEIL. If you put that in at the appropriate point in the checkout process in the shop at RebeccaDowns.com, you will receive a 10% discount on all items purchased. Once again, thank you for listening. There'll be another episode in a couple of weeks' time.